Imagine 20 people sleeping in a single cave, bodies pressed inches apart, in total darkness. In that darkness, your eyes are completely useless, but your nose never stops working. For most of human history, smell wasn't background noise. It was a survival tool. And when someone's smell went wrong, ancient humans did not just ignore it. They acted fast and deliberately, sometimes with surprising cruelty, sometimes with surprising care. This is the story of how our ancestors read the human body through smell alone. Modern humans can detect more than 1 trillion distinct odors. That number sounds absurd, but it comes directly from research on the human olfactory system. Long before language, before fire, before tools, smell was already doing critical work. It told early humans which plants were safe to eat and which ones would kill them. It told them which meat had turned and would poison anyone who ate it. It told them a predator had passed this way only an hour before. Smell bypasses conscious thought and connects almost directly to the brain's oldest emotional circuits. That is why a smell can trigger fear or disgust before you even understand why. This ancient wiring shaped how every early human group organized itself. And nowhere did that wiring matter more than inside a crowded ancient camp, which is exactly where our story properly begins. Picture a typical Paleolithic camp, roughly 40,000 years ago. There were no windows here, no plumbing, no separate rooms to retreat to. A group of 15 to 25 people shared one enclosed space simply to sleep. Body heat mattered more than personal space. In an ice age, you slept touching each other or you froze. That meant every smell inside that group was shared all night, every single night. A sick person's breath, sweat, and skin were sometimes only inches from a healthy person's face. In that world, noticing a smell wasn't rude. It was necessary. Archaeological sites like these caves preserve traces of exactly this kind of communal living. Hearths, bedding remains, and tightly clustered sleeping areas turn up again and again at these sites. For people living this close together, smell functioned as constant, unavoidable information. A stranger's smell told you instantly whether they belonged or whether they were a threat. Even food storage depended on smell. A spoiled catch could sicken an entire group overnight. Every single night, in every single camp, that same sensory system stood watch. So when a bad smell appeared, it never went unnoticed for long. Human body odor comes mostly from bacteria breaking down compounds in sweat. That process hasn't changed in 50,000 years. The bacteria involved are essentially the same species. Diet changed the smell too. Heavy meat consumption noticeably alters how the body smells. So did activity. A day spent chasing prey left a very different smell than a day of rest. None of this, on its own, was dangerous. It was just normal, expected background smell. Nobody panicked over ordinary sweat or the smell of a long day's work. It was tolerated, ignored, absorbed into the daily rhythm of camp life. The smell that actually triggered alarm was something else entirely. It came from something far more dangerous than a hard day's work. It came from a body that was actively losing a fight it couldn't win alone. An infected wound produces a very specific, very recognizable smell. Bacteria breaking down dying tissue release 2 compounds called putrescine and cadaverine. Those 2 chemicals are, quite literally, named after exactly what they smell like. Human beings, in every culture ever studied, react to those smells with instant, involuntary disgust. That reaction is not learned. It is ancient, automatic, and deeply protective. Before germ theory, before medicine of any kind, that smell was the only warning system anyone had. It meant one clear thing. This person's body was losing a battle against something invisible. And in a small group with no antibiotics, that invisible threat could spread to everyone. Before modern medicine, a simple infected wound killed a shocking number of people outright. Infection, not the injury itself, was often the actual cause of death. Even a small cut could turn fatal within days if it began to fester. So when that smell appeared in camp, everyone understood exactly what it might mean. It meant a decision had to be made, and it usually had to be made quickly. So what did ancient humans actually do next? The archaeological evidence turns out to be more complicated and more human than you'd expect. Archaeologists have found cases suggesting deliberate physical distancing. Some sites suggest sick individuals were kept toward the edges of camp in their final days. A simple separation, a few extra feet, a spot further from the main fire. This wasn't necessarily cruelty. It was instinct older than culture itself. Keep the unwell person downwind. Keep everyone healthy upwind. It is the exact same logic your own body still quietly runs today. Ethnographic records from more recent hunter-gatherer societies describe something similar. Sick or wounded members were sometimes moved into a separate, smaller shelter. Not abandoned entirely, but kept at a careful, deliberate distance. Food and water were often still brought to them, just left a short distance away. It was distance, not abandonment, a system built to protect the many without discarding the one. It was a brutal kind of math, but it was math that kept groups alive. And yet, the story does not end with distance alone. At a cave in what is now northern Iraq, archaeologists uncovered something remarkable. The site is known today as Shanidar Cave. There, they found the remains of an elderly Neanderthal, known as Shanidar I. He was blind in one eye, had a withered arm, and showed evidence of severe, healed injuries. A man in that condition could not have hunted, gathered, or even fully cared for himself. He would have smelled unmistakably unwell for years, and someone still fed him anyway. Someone helped him move. Someone tolerated the smell of his condition every single day. That is direct physical proof that a bad smell did not automatically mean abandonment. Similar findings at other Neanderthal sites like La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France tell the same story, often within the very same small, crowded group. But avoidance and care were not the only tools available to ancient humans. Long before soap existed, ancient people actively worked to manage smell itself. Fire was the very first tool. Smoke masks odor and repels insects that spread disease. Groups slept near fire not only for warmth, but because smoke changed the smell of the entire space. Water was the second major tool, and evidence for washing goes back tens of thousands of years. Rivers, lakes, and natural springs were used deliberately, not just for drinking. Ash, mixed with animal fat, worked as a crude cleanser, a rough, early version of soap. That combination genuinely breaks down grease and lifts dirt, even by modern chemical standards. Plants mattered enormously too. Aromatic herbs like sage, mint, and juniper carry natural antimicrobial properties. Rubbing crushed herbs onto the skin wasn't superstition. It measurably reduced bacterial odor. Burning them filled the air with scents strong enough to mask the smells underneath. Some groups lined their sleeping areas with these same plants, night after night. And then there's ochre, the red pigment found at nearly every major Paleolithic site. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, evidence of ochre processing dates back over 100,000 years. Some researchers believe ochre served more than one purpose: pigment and rough antiseptic. Applied to a wound, its mineral compounds may have genuinely helped fight infection. In other words, ancient humans may have been treating both appearance and infection with a single tool. Fire, water, ash, plants, and pigment together formed an entire hygiene system, tens of thousands of years before modern medicine. Body odor wasn't the only smell ancient humans had to manage. Breath mattered too. Archaeologists studying ancient teeth find enormous rates of dental disease. Abscesses, gum infection, and tooth loss show up constantly in prehistoric skeletal remains. A rotten tooth produces a smell that is chemically almost identical to an infected wound, which means bad breath could carry the exact same warning signal as a wound going bad. And ancient humans responded to it just as directly as they responded to any other bad smell. Frayed twigs, used as some of the earliest chew sticks, have been found at sites thousands of years old. Certain plants were chewed specifically for their strong scent. It was a very early, very literal form of breath freshening. Some evidence even suggests these habits were shared and taught within family groups. An elder showing a younger hunter how to clean his teeth wasn't vanity. It was survival knowledge. A healthy mouth meant a longer life, and everyone around you could tell the difference by smell alone. Now here's where the story gets stranger. Smell didn't only warn people away. In the 1990s, a famous study had people smell unwashed t-shirts worn by different men for 2 days straight. The people testing them weren't guessing at random. They consistently preferred certain scent profiles over others. Those preferences lined up with a set of immune system genes called the MHC. Mismatched MHC genes between partners tend to produce offspring with stronger immune systems. In other words, smell was quietly running a genetic compatibility check long before anyone knew genes existed. Ancient humans almost certainly used this exact mechanism, completely unconsciously, for choosing who to bond with. Your nose, in a very real sense, has always been doing calculations your conscious mind never sees. That same underlying instinct still shapes attraction today, buried under layers of perfume and modern habit. The instinct never actually left. It just got quieter. This wasn't only instinct. Early civilizations wrote this knowledge down directly. The Ebers Papyrus, an Egyptian medical text over 3,000 years old, describes diagnosing wounds partly by smell. It is one of the oldest surviving medical documents in the world. Physicians were instructed to note the odor of a wound as part of judging how serious it was. Centuries later, the Hippocratic texts of ancient Greece described the exact same practice. Physicians were taught to smell a patient's breath, sweat, and wounds as part of standard diagnosis. For most of human history, smell wasn't just social information. It was literally medicine. Doctors trusted their nose for thousands of years before they ever trusted a microscope. All of this points to something scientists now call the behavioral immune system. It's a set of automatic reactions: disgust, recoiling, avoidance, built specifically to keep disease-causing threats at a distance. You don't have to be taught to gag at the smell of rot. You simply do it. Every human being in every culture on Earth does it the same way. That reaction almost certainly kept ancient humans alive long enough to reproduce. The ones who ignored that smell got sick more often and left fewer descendants behind. Over tens of thousands of years, that means the disgust reflex itself was quite literally selected for. You are, quite directly, descended from people who trusted their own nose. Every single one of your ancestors survived, in part, because that reflex worked. And that reflex never actually stopped working. It just moved with you into the modern world. This is why, even now, you can sense something is wrong in a room before you know exactly why. It's why certain smells trigger a reaction you can't fully explain in words. None of that is simple squeamishness. It's 50,000 years of inherited pattern recognition, still quietly running. The specific dangers our ancestors faced have mostly disappeared. Modern medicine now handles most infections that would once have been a death sentence. But the ancient software running behind your nose never got an update. It still fires the exact same alarm it always did, tens of thousands of years later. Every time you flinch at a smell, some very old part of your brain is doing exactly the job it was built for. The alarm still works. It just doesn't always tell you why. So the next time a smell makes you recoil without warning, remember what that reaction actually is. It is not disgust for its own sake. It is an instinct built around a fire in a cave 20 people deep 50,000 years ago. An instinct built by people who had to know quickly and correctly who was safe to sleep beside. They had no microscopes and no germ theory. They only had their noses, and they trusted them completely. And every single time your own nose warns you about something today, you are still trusting the exact same system they built. 50,000 years later, your nose still remembers.